terms of embarrassing questions I've had to ask people to start a podcast, I think probably third on the list. So the one I'm going to ask you is definitely first. Third on the list is probably, it's tame enough. It's like, have you ever peed in the pool?
Okay.
That's a tame enough one. Like
everyone does that.
And everyone does that anyway, yeah. Although I don't think I have. Maybe I'm sure I have. And then the second one was, have you ever shat yourself on stage? That was
no. That's a weird one.
I've never had. Yeah. Although I've had someone. I seem to remember the guy who answered that question said no, but he does know someone that has.
I definitely know there's a really famous story in Liverpool about that. Yeah, so
just specifically in Liverpool.
Yeah, I know that the guy was wearing a white suit and that he'd eaten something that he was allergic to, and he was a bass player. They were in the middle of playing Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer, and they just heard a boom, and they looked around and he was collapsed based on the floor, and he'd shat himself basically, that you could see through the white suit.
Oh, that's about the worst.
Yeah. That's like Liverpool folk tale, one for the gods.
So that makes me think of like everyone knows the sort of the local crazy person in their town. Makes me think of always that. But anyway, your question is, I mean, I feel like I've built up to it a bit now, so I'm just going to ask you a question, and we can do whatever you want with this question. Your question is, if you had to make dick molds of your friends to use as coat hangers, who would you pick and why?
Oh my god. Oh jeez. So,
and we can keep this in or not, like this is totally on you, and I built up to this now. So
does it have to be a guitar friend? Because it
can just be anyone. You can
more.
I mean, you can make it could be fun. This would be an interesting tag on Instagram, wouldn't it? Like,
yeah, to be fair, I'm trying to think who I can imagine has got a monster and who is relatively, well, on the smaller side, shall we say, and what would look more aesthetically pleasing as you come into the house. I'm not so sure.
I mean, first off, why would you put them near the front of your house? Like, at least hide that. Like, have it in the wardrobe. Like,
I mean, could you put like a sock on it to make it look like a giraffe or something? I don't know. Like,
but then I would almost need to have it out in the open to at least be, so if anyone sees it, like, rather than they accidentally pull the sock off and they're like, at least if it's out in the open, you know, you can just be like, oh yeah, this is my stylistic thing, you know. Do you know the band Leprous?
Oh yeah.
So I spoke to Bard, the drummer from Leprous, and his background aesthetic was sort of images, as in his living room, like I am now, was images. Also, phones. Oh, you can't hear my phone buzzing. What am I now? Images of genitalia and little human beings flying out the top. Like little. Yeah. So this is the most. This is the most trash start to a podcast.
I absolutely love it, mate. I mean, I'm trying to think. Would friends feel left out if they weren't picked? Are we making this into a party, or is this? Do I have to pick just one?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, what coat hanger? I don't know. Yeah, I think your average coat hanger. I don't know. I guess it would have like 3 or 4, wouldn't it? But
yeah.
You know, what if you've got like a whole rack? Like,
this is getting worse and worse. I love it. Yeah, it would have to be 4 of my like best bros to just own it. And sorry if anyone comes in, but then, yeah, I can't believe I'm answering this seriously. But how do I explain that to my mother? You know, if she comes over to visit, like, yeah, this is just Carl, Phil, and blah blah blah.
But yeah. Oh, but yeah. Would they have to use their own? I'm going to stop. I have loads of really nice questions.
Oh man, I was so not expecting that. I love it. Absolutely love it.
I'm so glad, because that's a massive relief for me. And I feel I've lingered on this now too long, because I've been thinking about it. So not thinking about it, but like, you know, thinking about it. So, so you know, I always complain about segueing into proper topics of conversation. This is totally, um, yeah, impossible to do so. But I was literally just looking actually before the insanity ensued, just scrolling through Instagram, and I saw the Radar Festival announcement. Did that
Ah,
just go up? Am I
I
late to the
think
party?
it was literally just a couple of hours ago, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And I saw Periphery and some other wicked people on there as well. So, um,
Yeah, me and Wayne are kind of laughing because I think we must be like the only fusion band that are on there. So I mean, I can't really wait for the Circle Pits in Glitter, which is like a synth pop tune of ours. It seems like the polar opposite of what we'd expect. I was joking with Owain. I was like, man, you're Norwegian. You must have some corpse paint lying around. You know, it was like, maybe that's how we do it. Let's play fusion in corpse paint for that gig.
I think you should. I think that would go down well. Like, I, because and I think that metalheads love any excuse to like party. Like the the first band that was on at Download Pilot, the song, their opening song before they came on was that Venga Boys. We like to. It's called We Like to Party.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, and everyone went nuts because they just love that kind of change, that completely different genre, but it's still good. Like, I don't know if I like Venga Boys that much, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry if this is kind of devaluing your entire musical kind of pursuit, um, I suppose this podcast is already doing that. But
I
um,
love it, man. Love it.
uh, yeah, I think like metalheads and like I feel like people that like that kind of music generally they just quite like music that they find exciting. There are definitely the gatekeepers for sure, but I feel like on the whole, the people that are just there for a good time, um, I think they'll be open minded enough to
I get that impression, and I know me and Owain were really into that metal. I mean, him especially, he was the biggest Periphery fan. So for him, this is like, childhood dream come true. But yeah, we were both speaking about that, and I think maybe because our style is slightly different, with the open mindedness, like you mentioned, of metalheads, it seems like quite an inclusive community, doesn't it? And if we can bring an element of humour and a bit of like a party vibe, then maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, I
We're
mean,
just
you could the corpse paint. I think genuinely, I think that probably go down pretty well if you
yeah,
turned up like proper gothic like themes. So anyone that doesn't know who you are, they're like, whoa, what are we in for?
yeah,
And then just hit them with some fusion. Like, this does tie in with a relevant sort of question that I had, and I don't want to misquote the guy, but I think I'm quoting the right person. I believe it was Marty Friedman who, when he was talking about writing music and like harmony and particularly about harmony, he said I think he said something along the lines of, and I really resonate with this, that he likes simpler harmony or simpler chords particularly, so things that aren't complex to the ear, but then he has these very out there lines on top of it.
yeah,
And I kind of resonate with that, where sometimes I think that the thing that sometimes I struggle with more on like the fusion side or with jazz or kind of more complex harmonic movements is the chords that you can't, if you're not sort of fully educated in it, that sometimes you feel like you're trying to figure out, you know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but then, when I watch you play, when I kind of watch you play and when I listen to music, I feel like I can kind of connect with it in some way, which is really cool. Because there are plenty of artists when I hear this stuff, and I kind of feel like I don't know if I can fully like latch. I'm a massive metalhead, so like give me ones and zeros, like.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but my kind of question was, I'm interested to hear what your take is on that, but then also when it comes to the more creative like harmony, the stuff that is a bit more outside the box. How do you kind of make it work in a way that like that someone will be able to kind of maybe not hum it back, but you know what I mean? It becomes a memorable part even to someone that maybe isn't so clued in.
Dude, that's an absolutely great question. And it's something I can relate to. When I was younger, my dad, he's a bass player, was massively into jazz and fusion. You know, he introduced me to like Chick Corea. And then, you know, even like Steve Vai and Frank Zappa, he wasn't necessarily a fan of Vai, but, you know, that was around. And so I'd hear those crazy changes. I liked Vai and stuff, but then if he showed me like John Coltrane or, you know, anything that was a bit more avant-garde, I felt exactly the same as you. It was a little bit like, there's nothing for me to latch onto here. Like, if I look back at one conversation I had with my dad, it was like a Coltrane DVD or whatever it was back then. And I remember him saying to me, "Oh, Jack, listen to the lines in this, listen to the creativity." And I, at the time, you know, I was well into, I don't know, like the 80s metal, you know, like Motley Crue and, you know, Racer X, stuff like that. And I was saying to him, "Oh, Dad, it's just a load of randomness. Like, it's not that cool. Like, where's the melody? Where's this? Where's that?" I would cringe looking back at that now because that is one of my favorite styles of music. But yeah, I think that's the hard thing when you're writing like fusion and inverted commas. There's a whole argument that what me and Owain are doing is not necessarily fusion either. You've got to have still some kind of melody. And when it comes to writing more complex harmony around things, very often what we'll do is start with really simple harmony on the demo. So something that's maybe diatonic, and build the chords around that. So the hook is still the same. If you listen to a band like Dirty Loops, they're one of my favourites, if not favourite. That's what they are very, very good at. Like, they'll get the arrangement of, say, this is how I imagine they do it, and it's what I've read, is they have like the core of the song already there, and it could be quite a simple pop tune initially. But what you do is you look at, how can I reharmonize this melody? What chords can I put to accompany this? But the melody is still the core, strong, you know, it's the thing which you latch onto. So that, I think, is really the goal as well, not writing to sound complicated, not trying to, you know, say, look how many chords I can use in this one movement kind of thing. It's not really about that. If you want to do that, you're just going to get what sounds like an exercise. I think you have to have strong melodies or like a strong chordal idea that can repeat, that the listener can hook onto. Even if they don't necessarily understand every chord that's in that progression, it's something that they can hear and go, oh, you know, when you do like the stank face at a gig and you're like, oh, where did that come from? That was a bit naughty. I think that's what we're trying to throw in there. It's like, how can we make a statement that would normally be quite diatonic and nice sound just a little bit fancy with a bit of extra sprinkles on there, you know?
Yeah, so that's really cool. So like, sort of not reverse engineering as such, but sort of going, here's the simple version. You know, for the sort of the simple sort of answer to the question being like, write a melody you like over a simple progression, but then make that complicated, or not, you know what I mean, not like for the sake of it, but work from there. Because I always find as well, when I'm trying to write music, I'm so guilty of, I can't sit there and write something that to me sounds simple. You know, like I because I just think it kind of sounds a bit like that thing or whatever. But actually, sometimes you just got to find that little spark and then work from that. I find it so much, idea generation is so much harder than working with an idea and development for me. But that's an interesting, because I write loads of metal riffs and stuff, you know. But it's funny talking about the stank face. I need to give a shout out because I was watching a band called Love Is Noise in Birmingham, and I spoke to Cameron, who's like the singer of the sort of like the front man of the band, a few months ago, and they had a song. I can't remember. I don't know the name of the song, but it just started with this sort of like but, and then there was just a big break. It was a really in your face, and then it go but. So after the first, it went boom, and they made a noise, and then someone just went ooh, and then there's a bit of a break, and then they made another big guitar stab, and then everyone went oh. It was this back and forth, and I think they were trying to have this serious song, and then all the crowds go oh, you know. It wasn't like a massive room, so like everyone could just hear everyone going oh. It was amazing
kind of stuff, man.
Go on.
Oh no, I was just going to say, that's like the tension and release, isn't it? That's the I mean, I stand by that with everything in music. Like a chord progression literally is tension and movement, and then you get that release. And I think what you're describing there is the same thing, isn't it? You hear the stab, there's a moment of tension, and then there's the comedic relief almost there. That's the release. So you as the audience are doing that for the music, but as well, like the music is, what am I trying to say here? The music is kind of doing that as well. It's that you want to be on the edge, you want to come back, you want to be on the edge. That is essentially what fusion is. When we're doing all of these crazy chord structures, we're just trying to find tense spots to get you into, or to get your ear to wait for that resolution. I think that's the key, you know.
Yeah. The I think the thing I have, the thing that I think I would struggle with if I were more like a more down the sort of fusiony route myself as a player. I don't know what route I'm down, but like I'm in a route somewhere. But I the thing I've kind of, it's such a technical kind of world, or it can be. Do you ever kind of experience critical people more so maybe than other genres? I don't know if that's me kind of making that up in my own head, but how do you deal with that kind of putting stuff out there where the sort of the barrier to entry is really high, but also the boundary to impress people is also super high? You know, it is just with a lot of guitar music nowadays, you know, like, or just guitar playing. How do you kind of deal with that thing where you almost set your own boundary by playing so technically kind of proficiently? There's an expectation, and how do you deal with that kind of, I don't know, other perspectives on?
That's a great question, man. I think the answer to that would be that me and Owain are always trying to not take ourselves too seriously with it all. So we're trying to inject humor into a genre which is usually very serious and very, you know, academic almost. We have people who don't like it, and it tends to be, you know, guys that you would expect to be into this music, and it tends to be like the older cats, or like the jazz guys that are purists or elitists in some ways, because fusion as like a genre usually relies on lots and lots of improvisation, whereas in our music a lot of it is so heavily arranged that there's not that much space for it. Like the solos which I record will have lots of elements of improvisation, but there's still an arrangement there on the record. Like there will be multiple takes of that. Whereas in traditional fusion, it's more a case of you get a band in a room and, you know, you guys jam and then you improvise and the take is the take. There, we're done. So dealing with that can be kind of difficult, but the way that the genre is going, I mean, if I take Dirty Lips, for example, they don't have so much improvisation in the music, but that's how it ends up sounding so polished. And I think that is the kind of battle that we're having at the minute. It's to make sure that the older fans can still find it accessible, but then that the younger ones can see that you can play fusion and maybe it doesn't have to sound like elevator music. That's the other thing, you know, like that's the typical joke, I guess, is that fusion has always been kind of put together with, you know, the elevator sounds, it's the Weather Channel, it's all that kind of stuff. We want to bring that to a new audience, I guess, where we can say, look, you can play music which is inspired by jazz and jazz harmony, but make it sound a bit more cool, or at least funny. That's the big thing for us. You know, you see all the old fusion albums and it will have these big long words that usually relate to like maths or geometry or, you know, philosophical ideas, and the imagery will be like, you know, pictures of triangles and, you know, and like crazy shapes and stuff like that. Whereas for us, that's why we decided that we'd do it like with the first release, like an action poster of us with, you know, the guitars that is actually an AK-47 and stuff like that. It's a bit like, we kind of want to rebel against the seriousness of it. I think a lot of the guys who play this kind of music, I mean, not all of them, but they can take themselves very seriously, and that's something that we don't do. I think we can laugh at mistakes, we can laugh at things not being perfect, you know?
Yeah, there's there's a weird balance I find. I find like I'm sort of still finding my way through it between authenticity and being honest about your performance, who you are, and all of this sort of business, and actually that sort of slight separation that kind of makes Metallica look like Metallica. They don't just look like
Yeah,
four guys playing music. They're you go, wow, that's Metallica.
exactly.
And it's like there's a weird balance to be found, I think, where you want to be yourself and you want to, you know, uh, you want to be authentic and honest. Uh, but at the same time, if you want to kind of be like a professional musician, if you like, especially when it comes to like performance, band oriented stuff,
Hmm.
people kind of want that otherworldly. They don't want to feel like they're just watching, their mates cover band or whatever.
Yeah.
And I always think like sometimes I'm sat here, for example, with the podcast, and I kind of think like, do I need to think about like what I wear and how because every now and again, there's been a few podcasts where it'll just be like early in the morning or late at night, and I'm just chilled. I'm like I look a bit of a scruff basically, and I kind of actually maybe I need to because it's not dishonest of me just to like dress smart, is it? But
Ah, yeah.
obviously there would be a line where, for example, if I had to wear a suit and tie for every podcast, I'd be like, okay, that's not me. Um,
Mm.
do you think about that balance at all, or is it just something that you kind
That is something that we've started to speak about, I guess, now that the Pliny Tour's been announced and Radar and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. With other genres, there's like an expected attire in some ways, isn't there? To a certain degree. Like, as you said, a great example would be you wouldn't expect a metal band to wear suits, on stage. But we're trying to think of what that is for fusion. Like, because it's like this collection of all these genres, like what are we supposed to go for in terms of an image? And me and Owain are not the most fashion conscious dudes. I don't think. Like, I mean, I'm just basically a scruff from Liverpool, and he's from the middle of nowhere in Norway. So it's kind of like, not the most
fusion?
fashionable place. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I suppose the typical jazz way to dress would be just wear whatever you want, but know that you look better than the next guy. That would be the jazz approach. Like,
And a cool hat. It's
oh, and a
always
hat.
that.
Okay, yeah. Well, it makes you better than the guy next to you. So, like, I've
Exactly.
discussed with several hat people how to pull off hats, and I don't just mean like beanies. I mean hats. Like fedora
Oh,
type or like big. I don't think
Trillies.
I don't think it would suit me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think it
Yeah.
would work for me. I think it's longer hair. I think it works. So.
Yeah, maybe like a James Bay or someone like that. He pulls that off, doesn't he? I know I'm thinking the pop world there, but yeah.
Yeah, but he has got the long hair, hasn't he? Have you seen on? I don't know if you're aware of Spedding. He's on. He does a lot of stuff on Instagram.
Ah, that
Um,
name does ring a bell.
but I spoke
Maybe,
to him a while
maybe.
back, and he's a hat guy. He can rock a hat. Uh,
Oh,
and so yeah, I was kind of asking him like what, and I think he was saying something along the lines of just just wear the hat. Just
own
there's
it.
probably a life lesson in there somewhere. But, yeah, I don't know if I'm such a hat guy. I like beanies. I can do them, but like that doesn't count.
Yeah, I used to
Just a
be
sock for your head.
This is making me think of the very first question again. Jesus.
Oh no! Pull your
But
beanie up. Like, oh god,
exactly. Just hanging my beanie up.
who did that?
But yeah, I used to be known as like Jack the Hat as a joke because I always used to wear a beanie, but I think that was to just hide the massive forehead, like it's one of them. Maybe that's all right. Maybe I should ask that spedding guy his advice. Maybe
Yeah.
now that, we're getting close to 30, I'm thinking, oh, the hair is going to go very soon,
Well, I turned 25 on Monday. So
Oh man, happy
um,
birthday, dude.
thank you. It's well, actually, I suppose anyone listening to this, it was Monday a few days ago. Whenever this goes out in not too long, but it suddenly occurred to me. I was like, oh, I'm in the middle of my 20s, and then my girlfriend went, you're halfway to 50. I was like, leave me alone.
Oh, that is the worst, isn't it, man? I remember that day as well. Like, I just turned 29 in August, and it's similar, mate. You start to think, this is it. 30 is closer to 40 than 20, Like, I know it's not, but, like, in
Yeah.
your head, that's the way that you start thinking, and it's like, oh, yeah.
Well, it's closer to 50 than 10. So you know.
Oh, man, don't remind me. I've
So
been winding away up all week about that because he turns 30 like 2 months before me in May. And I'm like, dude, you are the boomer. That is it for 2 months. You are the boomer. You've got no say in anything
well,
that we do.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've lied on your Instagram because, hang on, scroll all the way back up.
Oh, shit.
28 years old.
Oh. Oh, man, that shows how much I update my Instagram bio.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Because I distinctly remember seeing that and then thinking, yeah. Well, because this is a question that I think everyone's guilty of this, particularly people in their 20s. Maybe more so nowadays than before, with the rise of just the internet and knowing everything that's happening with everyone all the time.
Yeah.
Is I've become quite conscious of like, oh, how old is that guy? And he's doing that well, and that means so if he's okay, so yeah, so you're 29 and you're doing this well at 29. So I guess when I'm 29, I want to be, you know, I end up kind of looking at, and there are younger guys than me now doing, quote unquote better in some way or other, whether it be in a band or followers or whatever. Do you find, as kind of a like, obviously still a younger person in the industry, do you ever kind of look at that in that way? Or
Oh man, I definitely used to, yeah. I mean, I started YouTube really young. I was like 15. And I remember because I always looked older, people assumed I was like 25, 26. And I'd say in the descriptions, like I'm 15, because at that age, I want people to know that I'm not 25, something like that. I was the one that they'd always send to the off license, to get the beers in when we were younger. But yeah, it is something that I definitely did do, I think, up until, yeah, maybe a couple of years ago. Because it does feel like a milestone in some ways, doesn't it? But then now that I've got to, I think even like 27, 28, is like a switch kind of went off and it was like, I don't really care anymore. Like everyone's on their own path and some people get there quicker than others. I mean, I've been doing YouTube, like I say, for almost 15 years now. That scares me. And it's like, I've seen friends of mine go on to be absolute superstars now, where they are like celebrity level. And you think, oh, they're the same age as me. What am I doing? But one guy had like the best advice for me a couple of years ago. Do you know Bumblefoot, Ron Than?
Yeah.
We got chatting, and it was back in a time where I had like real problems with panic attacks and mental health and stuff like that when I was like 24, 25. And it turns out that one of the symptoms which I had was like, I'd look at my hands and feel like I wasn't in control of them, or it wasn't me. And Ron reached out because even though we'd spoken a few times before, he'd seen that post that I'd made about that. And he was like, dude, this is exactly why I called one of my albums Hands. I went through the exact same thing. And he was like, don't worry, man. He was like, your career in music doesn't really start until your 30s. It doesn't get good until your 40s. And he said, I'm just entering my 50s and this is now the best I've ever felt in terms of a career. He was like, take your time and enjoy what you're doing, enjoy the process. And that was mega inspiring for me. It just changed my perspective a little bit, I think before that, I was very conscious that in the pop world, friends of mine had told me that 27 is like the golden age. If you get to 27 and you've got a career labelled out, then you're okay. But after 27, you're essentially nothing to the pop industry. That was what friends of mine who were in there said anyway. But now I'm starting to think, actually, this is the first year where we're touring original music. I've only ever done things as a sideman before. Like all of these opportunities seem to be happening now. And I'm wondering if what Ron said has even more kind of truth to it, now that we're 29, 30 kind of thing. Maybe he was right, man. And yeah, it's trying to switch off to the whole social media thing, I think is so hard for anyone, especially young people. Like now, more so than ever, when I was like 21, 22, there wasn't that many people doing the guitar thing, I guess. And there wasn't this daily update. There wasn't like the Instagram feed like it is now. That only came later. So yeah, I can totally relate to how now you're constantly fed just video after video, amazing playing after the most ridiculous chops over and over again. It must be very difficult to switch that off, but I do always try to remind myself, like, dude, everyone's on their own path, like, you make of it what you want. A lot of this takes luck as well as the hard work. I think if you're consistent, things are going to pay off anyway.
Yeah, it's such a weird. I think it's there's always that thing. It's the sort of the millionaire telling people that money's not all it's cracked up to be. It always feels like a little. I don't feel this as much as I maybe did before, but it always feels a little bit sort of this is by no means me criticizing you at all. It might be how it sounds, but so there will be people who hear that and then maybe start over that hurdle of like, because they might go, oh, well, it's all right for you because you're going on tour with Pliny and you're doing all this. But actually, the irony is that like I think it is about once you get there, sometimes you realize actually it is just about enjoying what and it's relative, right? Like there might be some artists where it's like touring with Pliny, don't want to do that. There'll be artists out there that think that, so that perspective I think is something that it's hard to. I'm trying my best to try and get it before I get there, if that makes sense.
Oh man, I mean, but how many years have you been doing it?
It's good. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I went to BIM in Birmingham. So I don't know if I count that. I've only been out of the thing I do pat myself on the back for is I teach guitar full time and privately.
Yeah.
And I left uni a couple of years ago. So
I'd say that's smashing it. Like if you're full-time living from music, that's kind of the goal, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing. And I had a band for a while, and I'm looking at doing something myself again. Maybe stepping into the front man role. I'll go get my voice up to scratch.
Oh, nice, man! I'd love to check it out if you've got.
I'll show you some stuff after. Like I said, it's my old band, so it's kind of bygones a little bit now, but yeah, for sure. I reckon. I don't know. It depends what you're into. Not quite dirty loops, but
Oh man, I love all sorts though, man. I don't have like the kind of genre thing. I love metal. I love Indian classical music. It's one of them. Like it's from those two ends of the spectrum. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what I would say with that is, I mean, for me, I think about this. I've been doing it for 14 years now, and it's only in the past couple of years. I mean, I've always had a full-time living since I was 18, whether that was doing covers gigs, teaching in high schools, whatever. But at the point where it's like you can live off your own music solely was maybe, or your own kind of profile and lessons and whatnot online was only like 3 or 4 years ago, man, 3 years ago, maybe tops. So if you think that was 12 or 13 years of work before that became enough, Yeah. And I would consider that probably slow. It's my fault. I took a break for 2 years, from everything to do with the online world. I was focusing way more on gigging and, I mean, playing for like 80s pop bands and stuff like that. Like that was, I mean, I still do that. But yeah, the focus wasn't necessarily on my music or my kind of myself as a brand. I hate that word, but like as a product almost kind of thing. It was more so being the side man. So yeah, for people who are listening out there who are thinking, oh, what do I do? And like I'm comparing myself to others, I'd say so long as you do the work and you do put in consistently, it should pay off in the end. I would say if you're working on your playing, if you're working on your music, it should work. So long as you don't just like, I guess the balance is, and I've seen this a lot on Instagram, is like lots of people will do quantity over quality. And I think that's the nature of everything has to be now. Everything has to be, in your face. You have to constantly post something. We were lucky in the sense that we were just in that pocket before where you could wait 6 months before you put out another video and the audience would hopefully still be there, but that gave us time to develop and grow and to get better at the instrument and to learn. I think that's maybe one thing today that I see with younger players is that they don't necessarily have that time to do that if they're constantly thinking about content. Maybe for some it might be a good idea to take a couple of months off to just work on the craft and then come back with something that's strong,
Yeah. The the when you talked about taking time away from the whole online world, like I think that I think people might find that weirdly relieving to hear because, yeah, again, anyone that looks at you and thinks, oh, I'm not there yet, I haven't got to that point, whatever it is that you'd say, wherever you'd say you are in the whole world of music, But so you say you took kind of, I'm not actually aware of this, so you took some time, like a sort of a break, I'm guessing like a detox kind of thing from, I suppose 2 years is more than a detox really, isn't it? So,
oh, yeah, man, it was a total put to one side,
Yeah. Was that music or was that just the online kind of world?
That was the online only, so I was still doing like gigs, I was still teaching and things like that. But yeah, I had massive mental health issues that like I say, it was like panic attacks daily that I had to go to like therapy for and all that kind of stuff. And so the pressures of the online world, even though it was smaller than today, so I can't imagine what it must be like for someone now, was just too much. The idea of having to post regularly, I didn't really enjoy playing guitar. It took time for me to get back into that, and after the therapy, that was all good. And touring with, I played with a bass player called Stu Ham. Do you know him at all? He was the guy with like Vi and Satch and all them. That was when I was, I think, 24. So that was kind of a boost of, I can do this as a job. What are you doing? You need to really get back into things. You need to get back into playing. But then really it was, I guess, the pandemic, because I didn't have to focus on gigs anymore. That gave me all the time in the world to, I mean, I was back into practicing by that point as well, like really studying hard too. But that relieved all that pressure. And it's almost like, I know the pandemic was a horrible time for lots and lots of people. But for me, it gave me the time which I needed to go, I need to reorganize my priorities here. My dream has always been to do my own music, to play the stuff which I want to play, not necessarily playing gigs just to pay the bills anymore. And thankfully and luckily it worked out. I know it doesn't always work like that, but yeah, I think it was the reorganization of priorities in my musical dream, shall we say, that inspired me to do what I'm doing now, I guess.
Yeah, it's I feel like the whole kind of that online that's what I suddenly drew a blank, but I remember what I was going to say. Someone that I started following recently is a psychologist who does these YouTube videos. His name's Andrew Huberman, and he does these. He's like a Stanford psychologist, psychology PhD, or like he's a doctor of psychology basically.
Yeah.
And he has loads of really interesting like tips, but one thing he was talking about, he talks a lot about dopamine and how that kind of affects your processes, and what you're talking about, like not feeling necessarily excited to pick up the instrument sometimes. And I think a big part of it is what happens is, before the online world, you pick the guitar up because you think, I want to play guitar, I want to practice, I want to get better, and I'll get reward out of just playing and getting better and maybe writing songs and stuff, but that is the reward. The reward is in the playing. But then when you start to post it online, the reward is in, part of at least the reward is in the statistics and in the likes and the comments and all that. And he said that it's a bit like any addictive behavior. He obviously wasn't talking about Instagram guitarists, but but he was saying about like how, if you start stacking these dopamine sort of releasing things, so you're playing guitar, but you've got like, I don't know, Netflix over there, and you're recording a video to post on Instagram, and you're scrolling Instagram as well. All of these things are bringing your like dopamine levels up, only to basically make it harder to enjoy and feel motivated to just play the instrument. So then you bring up this baseline of like, this isn't me. It's kind of half theory, but I think this is pretty established as an idea that, if you have all these other things going on, you're essentially just raising that baseline. It's a bit like how, someone who drinks a lot, they'll start on one drink, get some drunk or a bit tipsy, then suddenly it's like 3 or 4, and then it's like 7 or 8, you know.
Bottle of vodka,
Yeah, and I think it's exactly the same thing. It's like tolerance, isn't it? So
Mm.
I'm really trying to figure out for myself where the balance is between getting the content out online, because I want to. I haven't done much guitar related content for quite a while, but like, doing the content side of things. But actually, there's a balance to be found with your own psychology. I don't know
Yeah.
where I sit on that yet.
I agree. I read a study. Funny you mentioned about dopamine. I'm sure this was like a couple of months ago now, but they did an analysis of Conor McGregor, the UFC fighter,
Mm.
and it was like talking about his Twitter downfall, and they were saying that every like equals a shot of dopamine almost. But they were saying Conor went from the absolute pinnacle of Twitter land, if you like, back then. But then he posted something controversial, or it was a loss or something like that. Maybe it was the, Khabib fight or something. And his likes on his next post had gone significantly down. And they were saying they noticed the trend was he was trying to post more and more and more after that. And the likes were going down and down and down. And his posts were getting more outrageous and more outrageous. And they think it was this, like, the scream or the need for dopamine, which is something that humans, like, 10, 15 years ago didn't necessarily have, I guess, back then. We had social media, but it wasn't the same, was it? Like, not now. You couldn't see a number pop up with the amount of likes and the sheer number of likes that we get now as well. It was always like you'd be happy if like 7 of your mates liked a post on Facebook or something, back in 2009 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like with this podcast, I post reels. I'll do a few from each podcast, just to like highlight. It's a little advert, and it's a bit of a highlight. It's for people to share, so they can see. You can go, oh, this is what my podcast was like. And obviously reels. You see how many views and likes and whatever they get. And I posted the first couple, and they got like, I think the Instagram likes you for your first few posts, so they got like a few hundred or something.
Oh, nice.
Which is okay. And then it kind of went down less and less, to the point where it was getting like 20 or 30 at first. I didn't have a massive following anyway, but like I still don't have a massive following at all. But sorry.
Don't be silly,
but now when I post them, they regularly get a few thousand. But now if I get less than that, already I'm a bit like, what?
Yeah, it's like a benchmark has been set, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. If it used to be, I would expect it to get less than 100, so I just wouldn't. And it goes back to that whole expectation. What did they say? Sort of I can't remember. It sort of kills motivation, doesn't it?
Yes.
Kills happiness.
I can relate to that when you post like something that you're very proud of in terms of playing or, whatever, and you get less likes, you start thinking, have I done something wrong? What do I need to change? And then that can, if you don't switch that off, I find that you can end up posting things that are tailored to the platform, whether that's to try and stand out with technique or whatever, or the way it looks. That's going to be the thing. But that's a dangerous path then, isn't it? Because it can take you away from what you actually want to do in terms of your, as an artist, But at the same time, I get that content has to be tailored for each of these. Like an Instagram video now has to be a reel, doesn't it? It has to be vertical format. It has to take up that real estate on the phone. Yeah, it's a real, what's that? Sorry,
it's a good pun.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but it's one of them. Yeah, I always like to try and say to myself, I know it's easier now to do that, but to try and stay true to what you like. So one example would be, I'm all about improvisation. And I remember back in the 2010s, early 2010s, my old teacher was a guy called Tom Quayle. And I used to go down and hang with him and Rick Graham. They were like almost like second father figures to me. And what we'd do is we'd sit in a room and just jam for, hours and hours and hours. I'd stay over for the weekend. I couldn't play anything like those two could, but it was the fun and it was the enjoyment. And the videos that they would post would be these long form 10 or 15 minute jams over, a couple of chords on a backing track. And that for me was the thing. I used to love sitting there watching through it. Now that things have changed and people want to hear perfection almost, I feel like that's disappeared a little bit from YouTube. So my thing the past two years, I guess, is I have been posting these long form things just for myself, and if other people enjoy them, that's amazing. If they enjoy it, I want to thank them for the support, but it's more for me to be like, this is why I play guitar, like if it doesn't get so many views, I don't really care anymore. It's just a kind of nice thing to have. I think my point is here, I know I'm rambling, but my point is that you still want to have that part of you out there. Oh, man, sorry, my words have just gone. You might have to edit this out.
Nah, no editing. This is all. I know. I kind of. I'll come back to you, but it's kind of about sustainability, isn't it? Like, as in yes, it's all well and good, just pursuing all the likes and stuff, and yeah, you might do well at it, but you can't sustain that mental. Like, I just don't think you can keep the excitement, because that level of that requirement of dopamine release, going back to that, becomes so astronomically high that it's impossible to maintain, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I think like I think there are too many things nowadays that are too immediately exciting. Like, really weird example, but I play like chess online when I'm just a bit bored.
No way.
And I'm not very good. I'm pretty bad.
You and Owain would get on, man. He's a massive chess head.
No, we wouldn't get on because he'd beat me and I'd get annoyed. And I'm not very good. But my friend's like, you could be quite good. You're just not.
Oh, man.
Because I think he was trying to be nice. He was saying like, you've got the right thought processes and that. You just don't actually learn. I just kind of do it and just see what happens. But I found I would start by playing 10-minute games, so you get 10 minutes, they get 10 minutes. So the whole thing can work out at 20 minutes if you play the full game out, or longer, if you have time things on. But now, if it's not a 2-minute game either side where we're just rushing through it, I kind of get a bit bored. And I'm like, that didn't take long for that to happen. And I wonder if how many things in life, are so sort of expedited that they've become too exciting. It's things I've stopped listening to music in the car because I feel like there's so many little things I think we do that make everything all the time so exciting.
Yes.
That when you actually do something difficult on the guitar that's not that exciting immediately, your brain just switches straight off because you're just well, it's not as exciting as that 2-minute chess game or that,
Dude, 100%. This is a topic I heard it was actually on another podcast. It was from my old teacher, Tom. And they were talking about time management for mortals was the title of the episode. And on the episode, there's Tom and David, and they have two different viewpoints on practice for guitar. And Tom was trying to say he never found that he could, I could be getting it wrong, so I apologise if I am, but he never found that he could do the whole thing, where someone goes, I'm going to do 10 minutes of this, 10 minutes of this, 10 minutes, and they section it all out, 10 minutes on sweep picking, technique, whatever. The way he would practice would be, he was absolutely obsessed with it to the detriment of everything else that's going on in life. So health, being on time for a one-to-one lesson, looking after yourself. Whereas David came from it, from the opposite angle, I should say, where he practiced in these chunked segments and he decided, I'm not going to be the best at sweep picking, I'm not going to be the best at this. But if I work on these sections, I can be good enough at these different topics, And I found that I related to Tom more. It was more, I've never been able to do that whole practice thing for 10 minutes. I would go into complete obsession about one aspect, but I'm finding that harder now with all of the distractions and now with all of the, you've got to make content, you've got to make a video. Although the other week, I think I looked at a concept by Frank Gambale and I sat there thinking, I'll only be here for 10 minutes. And I checked the clock and it was 6 hours later. And you're like, oh my God, where is this gone? It felt like being 15 again. But I think this whole element of distraction and not feeling satisfied because things aren't exciting. Even with video games, man, I'm a huge video gamer if I get the time. But I've found myself turning on the video game when I've only got like an hour to play through it. And within 10 minutes, I'm checking the phone and I'm thinking, what are you doing? Like, you're just literally looking at a comment, or, you're watching a random YouTube video when the thing which you really would enjoy is sat right in front of you.
Yeah, I get wound up in the statistics for the podcast sometimes. I look at like how many downloads did this get? How many, and it's weird actually. What I did is if you want a handy tip, I don't know if you'd find this applicable, but I've got two phones. I've got the one. I'm not a drug dealer. I'm just
UK, mate.
I promise. So I've got my just phone, the one I communicate with people with. But then I've got an old phone. It's kind of a bit slow now and a bit sort of rubbish. But I put all of my social media stuff, like as in my like newsfeed based social media, like Instagram, Facebook, the actual Facebook app, TikTok, like because I don't use TikTok. It's just for the podcast. But even then I found myself getting drawn into it. So put all of them on another phone. So I'll go on them. I will probably, once we're done actually going up, there's a reel I want to upload from another podcast. And I'll maybe check the comments for a little while because I know it's good for engagement and that, to reply to your comments and stuff. So I do a bit of that. But I've noticed I feel just a lot more like, I don't know how to put it. Just, I feel better, I think, just because it's not on my phone. But I do find sometimes I'll just scroll and go to tap where it was, or I'll kind of look like, oh, it's not there. And I'll put my phone down again. So that's cool. My tip for anyone. You, if you want that tip, and anyone listening.
That's actually really cool, man. Yeah, so it prevents the doom scroll, I guess.
Yeah, well, because it's kind of on an old phone. I just put the other phone in a drawer, and I still get distracted by like Messenger, and I still have like Google, so I can search stuff on this phone. Because I found there were too many times where I just needed to Google something quickly, and I just be like, I'm not going to install Google every time for that.
Oh, yeah.
But beyond that, it's just like Messenger stuff, utility apps, and then it's in Google. So yeah, I think that's
genius, man.
I wouldn't go that far.
No, I mean, I'm thinking like, could I get away with it? It's one of those. Interesting you mentioned about TikTok relating to, like comparing yourselves. I would say TikTok for me was the funniest because I don't even know if I've ever publicly said that I've got one, but I used it as a kind of, let's put videos up and see what the reaction is, because there was zero followers there. And it makes me think this is what it would be like if I was to start fresh again. And man, the comments can be brutal. Like they're saying things like, this isn't music, oh, there's no feel to this. And like I was like laughing because you'll go on the profile and it's a beginner who's just starting to play or something, and you're thinking, oh man, really? I'm getting abuse like that? But I mean, it's one of them. It's fascinating because I guess I've been lucky that there's been some form of audience for these 15 years or whatever, whether that was really small or whatnot. But yet to start now would be, I think, the hardest thing to stand out. I think TikTok is evidence enough for me that I would not have very many people into my stuff if I go based off those comments alone, But yeah, it's fascinating, man. I really do feel for anyone who's just getting into this.
I think speaking of the comments and stuff, I've only had a few where I've kind of gone like, oh really? It's because I'm sure as the podcast grows more and more, I'll get more and more of them. But I reckon what needs to happen is they need to make it that if you're going to comment on a public profile, you have to have a public profile.
I agree. Yeah.
Because then that way, and it's not just so you can go and get loads of hate from everyone who disagrees with you. It's that mentally you've got to be prepared. Okay, well, if I'm going to say something nasty, I'm going to do. It'd be more like saying it to their face because they can see who you are as well.
Oh, exactly. They've got to own it, haven't they? If they're going to speak like that. I mean, I don't get the mentality of negative comments. I know people that would do that, but like in my head, maybe you're the same as me, Joe. It's like, if I've got nothing good to say about something, I just don't bother. You know, like you just move on. You scroll to the next video. I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing, but yeah, it's like, why do some of these guys waste their time doing that? Like, does that make them feel better in the day when they post a negative comment? I'm always fascinated by it, you know?
I think it's just about trying to get on level everything out, isn't it? I think there's people that maybe feel a bit hard done by that want to bring you down a notch to kind of level the world, level the playing field in their eyes. I don't really know. I guess it's that trying to have that empathy of just knowing, okay, something's gone wrong for them if they're making that comment, you know?
Yeah.
That's how I try and I guess think about it.
Yeah.
Because I always think that with, you know, with all sorts of negative behavior, you think like, what wound you up in doing this, you know? Like, I don't know. It depends what your view and get all deep and sort of about it, but like what your view of sort of the human condition is and whether you think people are naturally good or bad. You know, because there's that whole question of like, well, I don't know how naturally bad we are. I don't know if people naturally, you know, make comments like that. If that's like it just, I suppose there's no control, there's no parallel universe without the internet that we know of. Probably,
Yeah. Actually, thinking back, before I forget, I remember it was maybe a year and a half ago. A guy had like made like, you know, a silly comment, and I remember just saying, "Whoa, dude, like, are you okay, bro? Do you need a hug or something like that?" And I remember him replying, actually, like, "I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. I was just having like a shit day, you know, like, sorry, dude, you know, enjoy you playing or whatever, you know." And it was kind of like nice. And I'd seen that he'd followed, and then he's been interacting with videos since then. But you know, when you think yeah, you never know what someone's going through during their day, do you? And maybe that negative comment is just a product of their environment that they've been exposed to that day, even not necessarily all their life. But yeah.
There's something that's kind of we can go into it as much or as little as you like, but I know you mentioned about sort of things like sort of anxiety and sort of panic attacks before. And I suppose without focusing too much on it in sort of like I don't want to say like a negative sense, but you know, like in that side of things, like more on kind of a positive spin, I guess, is like, I mean, I guess the question partly is, do you feel like you've sort of, and again, this is a bit of a personal question, but do you feel like you've moved sort of past that now?
Oh yeah, man. Like I'm happy to talk about any of that kind of stuff all day. I mean, for me, I never could imagine when the panic attacks first started that I'd ever get out of it. I thought that there was something seriously wrong with me. It turns out it was like health anxiety, and it was a previous relationship that was kind of abusive on her side, that messed me up. You know, I was young, 21. She was a lot older. There was some like physical stuff. She stole all of my things. I won't go like massively into detail on that, but it was kind of like a traumatic event, I guess, and it went on for a few months after we'd split up. And I thought I was fine at the time, and it was a couple of weeks later. I remember travelling to a gig, a covers gig it was, and I used to live in Liverpool city centre. The gig was right in the centre, so I could walk. Take me 10 minutes, and about 5 minutes into the walk, everything started like spinning. I think that's the best way I can describe it. I felt really lightheaded. I had to hold onto these railings, and I was like, I need to get a taxi to this gig. I can't make this here. Got in the taxi, got to the gig. We played, it was like supposed to be 3 45-minute sets or something. We got 10 minutes in, and I remember having to say to the other guys, I think I'm going to have a heart attack here or something like that. Like, something's not right. Can we take a break? Which they weren't obviously happy with, but they let me go outside, somehow managed to get through the gig, and then it was like that feeling daily for 2 years, where every time I go to the doctor, they were saying, you're young, you're perfectly healthy, you're fine. But it was one of those meetings that they said, we think it's anxiety, you can either have medication or you can do therapy, but there's a wait, you know what it's like in the UK when you've got to sign up for something like that. It can take a long, long time. So I think after 6 months, I got to finally have an assessment. And after I'd filled in this questionnaire, they told me that you desperately need it. You've scored really high. The best, though, that we can offer is group therapy. And I was thinking, who, if they're feeling like me right now, is going to agree to group therapy where they're going to have to talk about their problems in front of, 20 other people or something like this? And the sad thing was, I mean, it shows how underfunded it was in the UK, but she said, if you'd have ticked yes to this question, you could have had one-to-one. And that was obviously the darkest question you could have ticked, are you feeling like this is the end kind of thing? So me, I agreed to do the group thing because I was just desperate. I was like, I don't care. I need to get this problem fixed if it is like a mental health issue. And luckily, I was the only one that signed up to it. So I ended up with one-to-one anyway. So I had a therapist called Joe, who was amazing. And, he was into music. He was into John Mayer. So we connected on that level anyway. And he basically, I didn't realise that it was the problems that had happened with the ex-girlfriend. I thought it was just physical and, like there was something desperately wrong with me. We got talking a lot. When he realised that that was the case, he referred me to like a CBT specialist, and then that was all exposure therapy. And it turned out that what she gave me was actually like life-changing. I never thought that CBT would be a thing for me. That she said the goal was to go to Asda every day. And like, you have to spend as much time as you can in there. They must have thought I was a weirdo or I was trying to rob the shop or something like that. But basically, every 5 minutes increment that you are there, you had to write down how you were feeling in that moment. And the first few days, at 5 minutes, you'd feel like, oh, I'm going to pass out. I think I'm going to have a heart attack. And then it would get to like the 5th day and you realise that actually there was no danger there and everything was fine. And doing this in multiple different ways, that's how I got over it. And, it was that literally changed my life, something as simple as that, CBT. I mean, there was other elements to that. But basically, yeah, I mean, it proved to me that there was a point where I did truly think, oh, this is where I'm going to be like for the rest of my life. I was having panic attacks on gigs, which is not ideal. One of the biggest ones I think that we did, it was the biggest gig I've ever played in my life. It was 40,000 people at an 80s festival. And we only had like a 20-minute set with the band. But I started to have all of those feelings just before we were going on. And I remember that being hell, like when you're inside your own mind and you're thinking, oh my God, this is the end. I'm going to just pass out on stage and die. And then, that'll be the news article afterwards. But yeah, I know I'm ranting, sorry, man, but
that's good.
I'm forgetting now what the initial question was. Sorry, dude.
That's the best kind of question.
Yeah.
Right, so that I think the question was just, have you kind of got past that? But what I mean, and actually, to be fair, you answered the second bit. I was going to say, what do you feel like? Or maybe you can, if there's anything more you feel like is important. But the question was then going to be sort of what, if you feel like you've moved past it, or at least to a degree, what's helped you to do that? And I find it really interesting what you say about exposure, because that's the hardest thing, isn't it? Like, here's something you don't like, do it, a lot. And there's certain things like I always I'm not a socially anxious person. Like well, sometimes I can be, but like I'm probably less so than a lot of people, I think. Like, well, hopefully, so I have no trouble when we signed on. I wasn't like, I kind of, I was happy to, and I'm fine in groups. I don't mind talking to people or groups of people. It kind of doesn't faze me too much. I've never been weird about going on stage particularly, but the one weird thing I do have is if I'm eating with someone, like I don't know what it is, but like I don't like restaurants, like fancy restaurants, because I just feel really like everyone's watching, and like if I don't eat the food, that like I don't know, that it feels like a whole weird scenario, because you're paying for the food, and like what if I'm not paying? What if someone else is paying? And then especially, and so I get funny about, weirdly, and my appetite can go from 100 to absolutely nothing in about a minute, because I'm just like a bit, and it's a really odd one. So I've been trying to just more often, like, it's a good excuse to go and eat nice food, but like
to do it,
yeah, because like me and my girlfriend will quite often go to a nice restaurant, or not even nice, but just like a decent place, I was just saying to her, I was like, I'm so glad we didn't do our first date at a restaurant, because I wouldn't have eaten anything. Like, um, and yeah, and that's a weird one I have, and I feel like through doing it more, I still sometimes feel it a bit, but I can sort of like I feel like there's a bit more control of it there now, and I don't, I don't know where it came from. There's no
like,
like, you know, um, you're talking about like sort of past relationship, and I don't see it seems obvious, but you can connect the dots there, like from how you're talking about it. Whereas to me, I'm like, I have no clue why. I have no like bad experiences with food. I haven't had like waiters hit me or anything.
yeah, there's no trigger there. No,
I don't think. I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, I
that's
found exposure to it has been the thing that's helped the most.
that is fascinating. Like, I think that the CBT therapist told me the best way she could describe it was like, imagine in the Asda or in the supermarket for any American, or they don't even say that. What do they say in America for a supermarket?
Mall? Is it the mall?
Mall.
No, that's like because that's like a complex, isn't it? That's like a big
Grocery store, is it? Maybe that's
I guess that's probably what they say. Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I know we're totally going on a beeline there, but yet she explained that like your body, whether consciously or not, is like imagining that there's a lion there. She used as an example that is stood at the other end of the aisle, and she said your kind of human instincts are programmed for fight or flight, and she was saying that essentially all that adrenaline is building up and it's telling you need to get the hell out of that place right now. But she said if this happens all the time, and say you have a panic attack in one of these places, your mind can subconsciously associate it with this being danger and you needing to leave. So I wonder with the restaurant, if you, just because you've had that feeling before, if subconsciously that's like a trigger in your mind, that's like a fight or flight response, of, oh, I don't like this. I think I need to go, Whereas the more and more you do it with like the exposure therapy, and as you were saying, just making it a routine, somehow that feeling disappears.
Yeah, it is a weird. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't want to go giving out psychology advice to like I'm a guitar player who takes some interest in it at best. But yeah, I mean, like I think people will hopefully gain a lot from what you've said about from your experience of that, and hopefully have some artistic ideas for coat hangers as well. Anyone that's just hopped in at this moment, go and watch the beginning or don't. I don't know. But
prepare your beanie.
That's a weird shaped coat hanger. Yeah. But I had a few like maybe we could just so I don't take up the entirety of your evening, we could do like there's a few questions I had that I think would be good, like little, not quick fires, but you know what I mean, like little kind of, what's the word? It's like little bit
sound bites.
Soundbite kind. Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah.
What's the content? But it's only a couple actually. So one was, and I see you did that riff hard sort of course with riff hard, right?
Yeah.
And did you have anything in mind when teaching specifically like a lot of metalheads and riff, high gain riff kind of guys? What was like? What do you think would be step one for someone who, this might be a bit of a foray into your course, I don't know if it will be, but you can reveal as much as you will. But step one for a metalhead who's playing your standard metal riffs, maybe not standing out as much as they want to. What do you think would be like step one to go, okay, here's something you can think about that will help set you aside maybe and give you sort of voice?
Yeah, that for sure is fretboard visualization. And understanding harmony just on an intervallic level. So that's the approach which both me and Tom Quayle use. We base everything around intervals. So you can analyze like a metal song in terms of the harmony, and the goal is to translate wherever the intervals of that scale or particular mode or sound are to the guitar, and to be able to see that rather than necessarily a 3-note per string pattern or cage system or one of these things. Doing it the interval way enables you to both like practice orally what they sound like, and I mean by that like the listener aspect of it, not like the beginning of the video, and then visually like what they look like on the fretboard, and that can open up so many avenues for, especially for a player that comes from a metal background. I mean, I kind of came from that rock and metal, and the whole idea of learning guitar was about pattern-based playing, and you learn your pentatonic positions, 3-note per string. That does not necessarily help you in the long run. It helps you get good quickly, but then to go those extra steps, you have to have that extra level of understanding, I think, of the harmony. So yeah, I'd say fretboard visualization for sure, and then harmony.
Nice. And when it comes to like teaching more technically difficult ideas, what's your thought process when it comes to teaching more ideas that aren't so easy to, because I know obviously you've got your stuff on Jam Track, but then there's also just a lot of I know you do you teach private as well?
Quite a lot of like free lessons, and then there's a lot of masterclasses on my website as well.
Yeah. What's kind of your approach to like trying to get across more complex ideas than just your simple scales and things, like when you talk about harmony and these kind of more complex ideas?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where harmony and theory can seem like such a scary path to travel. And I always was of that mindset until I met Tom, and then the light bulb kind of went off. Now, things which I think are incredibly simple can be really complicated for someone who's not been taught correctly, or they've been taught the wrong angle at which to approach harmony. So like my kind of ethos, or my thoughts of my pedagogy are that I should try and convey this in the most simple way possible, that the learner gets the concept quickly and has a grasp of that idea, because once you've got the concept, you can run with harmony ideas. I think the big thing is like learning all of the rules as quickly as possible, and then learning how to break them is the other story. I know that's the cliche that a lot of people say, but there's a lot in that statement. The other thing is that I try to say to a lot of students, they might see flash, they might see harmony as this is the advanced stuff, this is the technical stuff that I need to get into to become a better player, when in 99% of cases, it's actually their time feel, it's their subtleties in their playing, so bending, vibrato, like these kind of things that actually the more important details to sound pro, in inverted commas, time feel being the huge one. I'd rather see a player who plays something super simple, with good time feel and good intonation, good vibrato, than to hear a guy who's got tons of technical facility, but the time feel is all over the place. You're never going to get a gig that way, at least in the session world. You're never going to be able to, I don't know what to say. You're never going to be that player that you want to be unless you fix those time feel issues first. That's what I always think with this. So that when I start with a new student, that's the first thing I look at, is the time feel. And then we can start exploring harmony, usually from scratch, I find, because a lot of the way in which people learn about the more complicated things, if they've been learning from the internet, is not necessarily the best way to do it. Not to chat shit about anything that's out there, but there's a lot of bad information out there that can potentially hold you back for years if you were to believe it. You must have seen these videos where it's like the secret to the such and such scale, and it's like, man, there's no secret, there's no hack. It's hard work,
I've said to several students where I've just said to them, look, if you see a course that tells you how to play sort of faster, how to visualize the fretboard, it's like, it might be useful, it might, but the most useful thing is just finding what works for you. Now, if that thing works for you, that's fine, but what they're telling you is not, music's been around for a while, long enough, and it's been kind of the same for long enough, in terms of the formulas and things, that like, I always see there's a few things where I see people talking about sort of do this to play faster, like, and ultimately I think, watch Marty Friedman play. Nothing about what he does should be enabling him to play quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
But he can. Zach Wilde, like, you look at their right hands, they're both like sort of cocked round to the side. If you watch someone like Andy James, you rarely see his little finger in use as much as the first three.
Oh yeah, he's a 1-2-3 player, isn't he?
Yeah, and it's like
first and foremost.
so. Yeah, there are the tools. Like I always try and get people to make sure they're using the little finger and stuff. But it's like you can be better than most people if you just work at it. Like that's how I see it.
That's the thing. At the end of the day, it's the hard work that you put in, isn't it? The teacher can only guide up to a certain point. Like when I'm talking about like theory and harmony concepts, I've had guys in the past where when they email to inquire about the lessons, they'll tell me what they've done and what they can play. And if I don't see a video, I'm trusting them that is the level that they're actually at. And more often than not, I've had the student come in and I listen to them play and I'm like, man, there are so many holes here that there is no way you're going to understand the concept that you're asking me about unless we cover these topics first. And that's hard work. There's no shortcut to it, It's like, and it's the question of, do you actually need that to achieve the music that you want, or have you just read that that's a cool thing to use?
Are we talking about modes?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I've had guys say, "Oh, so show me some diminished chops," and then you're like, "But dude, you can't visualize the major scale on the fretboard yet. There is no way in hell that you're gonna visualize diminished scale harmony or understand where to use it."
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so there's one more thing I was going to ask about, which was, so you're based in Switzerland. Is that where you are right now?
Yes, yeah, Zermatt, actually.
What's the language because I know there's so many language areas in Switzerland. What is where you're based? What language do they speak there?
Dude, it's messed up. So in my village in Zermatt, it's Swiss German. But if I go on the train to the next town, then there's the border where they speak French. And then if I go... Italy is a couple of kilometres that way. You can't access it by foot here yet. Next year you will be able to. But if you go a couple of kilometres that way, it's Italian. So it's a total mess. And the worst is that they mix words from all three. So the first time I came here, I was in the shop and I heard someone say to me, merci, even though we'd just been speaking in German, or me attempting to speak in German. And I was like, oh. But that is Swiss German. So you're getting that going on. And we say ciao instead of au revoir or, see you later kind of thing. It's ciao, which is Italian. So it's just a complete mishmash of all three.
Well, it's a bit like in the movies when they'll be like, it'll be like a total foreign language, maybe like an Asian language or something. And they're talking and they've got the subtitles. And then they'll say a sentence in perfect English. And you're like, so do you just go in and out of these
Yeah.
It's just they say the important line in English just to make sure that we're
that sounds very Japanese to me.
Yeah. It's like it's in you hear it in all sorts of movies where there'll be like a whole thing they'll be talking in. It's often it's in like Lord of the Rings. They'll be talking like Elvish. Yes. And then they'll randomly say the important bit in just like English, Yeah. What, you just decided to switch there? Like, why? But my question was, are there parallels, or have you seen any parallels from learning a language or learning to communicate, and apparently three? Have there been parallels that you've experienced between that and music, kind of learning music?
Dude, this is, the perfect question. For me, I always have said this, every masterclass I've ever done, music is a language. There's no doubt about that. Like, the way I think of, especially improvisation, is that you can learn it in terms of, you can read about it and you can read the harmony and you can read the theory and maybe you'll understand it. But when it comes to actually playing, that's a whole different story. When we first start playing guitar, we're learning licks, we're learning language, we're learning vocabulary. And that's how we learn to play with others, isn't it? And it's the same with language. When you're a kid, no one's telling you the structure of a sentence in English. And they're not telling you the theory and the harmony, but why that works. So, I always use that as the main thing that students need to understand if they want to get better. They have to transcribe, they have to listen to the music that they're wanting to sound like and absorb those ideas so that it becomes something that you can just throw out. It's like you learn these whole sentences. You're not just learning necessarily individual words. On the other hand, I am absolutely terrible at languages. So since I've been here, I moved just before the pandemic. I tried studying German again. I'd studied it in school and it was what I wanted to study at A level if I didn't do music full time. But the German here is very different from German, shall we say. This is called Walliser Deutsch, as in the canton where we are. And everyone from the rest of Switzerland says they can't understand these guys here. And then if you go to Germany, they consider it's like a completely different language, you know. And one thing I found fascinating was when I've visited Germany, is I find myself understanding what they're talking about, at least the context, even if I can't reply, even if I can't, you know, make myself, like, express myself back, I know what's happening. Whereas here, no, it's just a complete mashup of, yeah, that and the accent. You'd think me having a Scouse accent, which is pretty hard to understand, would have any of these things, but apparently with Swiss German, no. You know?
Yeah, I found I studied French A level, and I also studied Latin GCSE.
Oh, wow.
Because, you know, I clearly had lots of other interesting things to do and picked that one. But I got two GCSEs out of that. I did Latin language and literature. So we studied, and actually some of the poetry was really like inappropriate for anyone to be reading.
Those
like,
goddamn Romans, man.
They had some naughty ideas in their poetry. But yeah, and I found actually weirdly, I can quite often be looking at signs, like when I was in Italy about a month ago or a couple months ago, and I could kind of understand quite a lot just by looking like menus and things and signs. I kind of knew just words. Again, I wouldn't be able to speak the language, but I think I could get by just taking in the language. So it's interesting how you can kind of pick that up. But
well, I mean, man, an example of mine with that is that I never studied in Spanish in school, but I had two ex-girlfriends that were Spanish, and I picked up the language from just listening to them speak to their friends or their family. And it's one of those things that I would probably feel way more comfortable having a conversation with someone in Spanish now, regardless of never studying it, than I would speaking German or French, which, you know, they do here, and I did study those two in school. Like,
I watched Narcos. Have you seen Narcos?
Oh yeah, maybe the first season. Yeah.
Oh, the second one is awesome. I mean, first and second is awesome. I haven't even watched the third because, like, I won't spoil it. But well, if you know the story, then you know the story. But
Yeah.
there are lots of obviously quite rude, sort of Mexican Spanish words. I mean, they're Spanish words, but like I think they're specifically like Mexican Spanish.
Yes.
Or, sort of not Mexican, I suppose South American. It's probably me generalizing a bit. I'm going to get in trouble.
Don't be silly, man.
But I had the reason I say that is because my old housemate, she was Mexican, or still is, I assume, and I would just pick the rude words and start and like to find out if they're rude. And I say them, she go, oh, and I'd be like, yeah, I found a good one.
That is cheap. Well, that's what they say, isn't it? Always learn the worst words first, and then it's more likely to go in.
I said one. She's like, where did you learn that? TV. Like any well brought up child, I learned it on TV.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think we've covered quite a lot of stuff. Like some more important, some less important, but less important stuff is sometimes the most important stuff. I don't know. Trying to make that sound.
I love it, man.
Huh?
I loved it, man. Absolutely love it.
Oh, awesome, man. Well, I'm glad you did. I did too. And I'll have to get you to ask your question. So please don't set me up in the same way, because like it's only. I was just thinking, like, asking that question. I was like, I was talking to my parents actually. I was on a Zoom call with them before this, and I was like, I think he's cool, and I think this question will go fine. My only concern was like, if I said it and you just went, oh, like, and if it spoiled the whole rest of the conversation.
No.
So yeah, but I mean, you can ask a ridiculous question, or you can ask a profound one, or whatever, and then also need an artist pick for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, this is a tough one. I won't go extreme like the other guys. I'll ask something more based around music, but if you could pick, assuming that these are going to be an artist,
so it's always like musical people,
right? One band or group or whatever to support and you're only allowed one. Who would it be? If you have to bear in mind that you'd be on the road with them for, I don't know, 6 months.
So support on tour.
Yeah, or play alongside. It doesn't have to necessarily be a support thing. Which other band would it be that you would choose?
Yeah. Nice. That's a good question. Yeah, because I've had one like, what's your dream lineup? That's kind of different because you're not. Well, it was whether you put yourself on your dream lineup. I don't know. I would just because.
Yeah.
But yeah, good question. Because it makes you think about like what are they like for 6 months? Because there might be like your dream band, but you might know that they're just like assholes, or like Motley Crue. I mean, like what maybe not now, but certainly back in the day, like they'd be the dream, but also like Jesus, you got to keep up. Or like Pantera, they're known for drinking and all of that.
Exactly. I guess that's what I'm trying to go for with that comment. It's like, yeah, it has to be someone that's not going to put you in physical danger, I would hope. But also, yeah, dealing with different personalities for a long time, especially if they're like a rock star, I can imagine that could be difficult.
Yeah. I just realized as well, this camera has not broken in the whole thing. And this is its first run. So
oh, man.
That's good. And it doesn't, well, it's quite warm. So I don't know how happy, I'm not going to go touching it. I don't know how happy it is, but I think it's okay. So yeah, and I also need an artist pick from you, like a sort of an artist you feel deserves some love, maybe that doesn't get the love they deserve.
Okay, I might need a second to think about this, if that's cool.
Good. Some elevator music on.
Yeah. Hang on, who's someone that really doesn't have the recognition they deserve?
It's too many.
I'm going to go for a friend of mine called Tabor Mullins, his name is. He's an American dude. Plays keyboards, drums, guitar. Mainly like video game music covers, but like in a fusion way. And it annoys me because he's so ridiculously talented at each instrument. And he's got the humour, he's got all of these quirks. Yeah, he deserves a way bigger audience, I think. Just for the simple fact that he's a monster on every instrument, that is enough in itself, and he's also like, his full-time job is something crazy. I don't know whether it's to do with like building rockets. I could be getting that wrong, but yeah, it's like he's one of these guys that it just seems like a genius in terms of everything he touches.
Do you watch Mitchell and Webb or have you watched it?
No, actually, what's it?
Yeah, it's the Peep Show. The Peep Show guys, David Mitchell and.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole sketch of the rocket scientists at the party telling everyone, obviously, well, it's not quite rocket science, and then the brain surgeon walks in. Yeah. Anyway, I was wondering if you knew the. Oh well.
Fair enough, man. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. And then also, if you have anything you want to promote to the world, I mean, this will be out in probably a month or so.
Okay.
How promotable your things might be. Obviously, just promote yourself.
Yeah, I can give away a secret here, I think. So
I mean, you've got a good. It's going to be at least 4 weeks, so as long as you know it'll be kind of this month. Yeah.
Okay. So it'll be December, right?
Oh God, yeah.
Yes.
It will.
Jesus, I'm glad I got that right because I'm so lost with where we are in the year, man.
Yeah, so it'll be like early December, yeah.
Perfect. So by this point, Owain and I should have released our own kind of. Think of it like a Patreon, but it's not the same. It's supporting us, but the idea is that we are covering lessons on music production and guitar. So it's all to do with MIDI, mixing and mastering, all that kind of stuff. But it's also the flip side of that, which is how I approach the guitar playing, how we write our music, how we approach these two subjects from two different angles, really. And there's tons of things on there, like there is a monthly hang, there is a monthly Q&A thing, there's, loads of different things. I don't know exactly what it will be right now. I'm just realising now as I'm saying this because we're still not.
It'll be loads of stuff.
Yeah. There's a backing track bank on there. There's tons of cool stuff. But it's mainly like a way for you guys to learn every month from us too and interact, but also to support us with our music as well, like as a long-term thing,
Yeah. But if you really want guitar lessons, come to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had it quite a few times actually where I've had people on the podcast, they'll be like advertising their guitar tuition related stuff. I'm like, shut up. I'm trying to earn a living.
Yeah, exactly. Competition. What are you doing with it? There's that, and then of course there's just like the Pliny tour and Radar Festival. They're the only two that are announced as of yet.
That Radar Fest lineup is wicked. I'm well excited about that. I've never been to Radar Fest. There's always been lineups. So I've gone, oh, I might. 'Cause I know it used to be in Guildford, and I used to live near there. So it's a good excuse to go home. But I never quite got around to it. But I think I'm definitely going to go to this one because
Dude,
Manchester. I'm in Birmingham, so Manchester's not too hard to. It's quite easy. It's like an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah. Man, we've got a hang if you're there. I want to check out all the other bands. I think I'm more excited for that than actually playing, you know?
There's some wicked bands in there. So for sure. Well, I'll we'll leave it at that.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. It's an
That's all
absolute
good.
pleasure, man.